Welcome to Food Revolution Conversations, where we explore healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for all. Welcome to Food Revolution Conversations. I'm Ocean Robbins, co-founder and CEO of Food Revolution Network. And our focus in this interview is on how we can tap into Indigenous wisdom to help us restore right relation with our own lives, with each other, and with our planet. And I'm thrilled to be joined for this interview by Indigenous activist, ecologist, scientist, and healing foods advocate, Lyla June. Lyla is an Indigenous environmental scientist and healthy foods systems advocate. She's a doctoral student at the University of New Mexico and an educator, community organizer, musician, and inspiration to a whole lot of people, including me. Her work focuses on personal, collective, and ecological healing. Her internationally acclaimed performances and speeches bring together prayer, hip hop, poetry, acoustic music, and words. And her personal goal is to grow closer to Creator by learning how to love deeper. Lyla, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Ocean.
Well, I'm just thrilled to have this time with you. There's a bit of a myth that Indigenous people pre-Columbus were primitive. And yet the truth is that there were extremely sophisticated cultures that did something that certainly nobody in industrialized civilization has come close to doing, which was actually making the earth more and more abundant and beautiful. Can you share a little bit about that and what your studies have taught you about the history there?
Yeah, so my PhD work is at the intersection of Indigenous food systems and Indigenous land management, and sort of how we would cultivate the natural food-bearing capacity of entire bioregions. And so even though I'm getting my PhD in it, I'm still like a little kid compared to some of my elders who have been not just talking about this, but living it their whole life. So I'll just illustrate what you're talking about with a couple of examples. So one is in Kentucky, the Shawnee ancestors, they actually created a food forest. And we know this because the fossilized pollen record is there in the ponds, and you can date the macrofossils and the pollen to see how old it is. And what we see is that about 3,000 years ago, the Shawnee Osage ancestors in what we now call Kentucky actually sustained a black walnut, chestnut, hickory nut, acorn, sumpweed, goosefoot, all these edible plant species in that area for 3,000 years. It persisted. We also see fossilized charcoal, which indicates that they managed this with fire. Low intensity burns, clearing the understory, making sure you only have 13 trees per acre, very thin forests, because when you get what we see around Santa Cruz or pretty much anywhere in the US where it's not being developed, is we see really overgrown forests where you have a lot of really, really sick trees instead of a few really robust and healthy trees. We see this influx of pollen come in 3,000 years ago and completely replace a cedar and hemlock dominated forest. So they just moved in, transformed the whole place into a food forest, persisted for 3,000 years. And so another example is the Bella Bella, British Columbia community. They're also, the true name is the Heiltsuk, and they're right up between, I'd say, Vancouver and Alaska on the coastline in British Columbia, and they hand plant these kelp forests to this day, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. And the effect of this kelp forest cultivation is it increases the surface area upon which the herring, which is a small silver fish, can lay its its eggs. And so they build these huge kelp forests. This is a very special kelp that grows faster than any plants we're used to. I think it's like a meter a week or something crazy like that. And so you have abundant surface area. And this increased surface area provides the fish eggs provide the foundation of an entire food web. The seals eat it, the killer whales end up eating it down the line, the salmon, the wolves, the humans, of course, the eagles, everyone up the food chain depends on the herring roe. And of course, the herring is very prominent in their creation stories, in their histories, in their cultural knowledge and stories. And so essentially, it's a very important part of the ecosystem there, and they understand that, and they cultivate it. So that's another example. Right there in Santa Cruz, the Amamutsan people, the chairman, Val Lopez, I always love to quote him. He's a brilliant man. He said that their rule of thumb was to have about 13 trees per acre. And he said there was the oak groves, which of course provided abundant acorns, which, if you know how to work acorns, is actually incredibly delicious and nutritious, which they did. And of course, these oak actually have fire-resistant bark because they co-evolved with human fire for so long. And then one of the other examples I like to give is the clam gardens, right? The clam like to exist a certain depth below the ocean surface. And so along the coastline, many nations will actually increase the depth of the shoreline to create habitat for these clams. And so what I'm finding is a lot of indigenous food systems are about habitat construction, such that your food will come to you and you don't have to go to it. And you not only create food for yourself and your people, but for all living beings, because you're not the only one eating those clams.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And it's actually very heartening, I think, for those of us who think that we have to invent something that's never been before in order for our species to survive, to realize that we have some wisdom we can draw upon. And just to illustrate, in case anybody who's watching right now isn't familiar with what we're up against, we are on resource consumption overshoot. In the United States, as around the world, we are depleting our aquifers at an unsustainable rate. And, billions of people are going to run out of drinking water in the next generation. We are depleting our topsoil. In fact, UN researchers have estimated that we could run out of farmable soil in the next couple of generations, because the amount of soil that we have to grow our food is, a third what it was, a quarter what it was in many places in the US when Columbus landed. And so we're depleting our soil, we're depleting our water, we're destabilizing our climate, creating more droughts and floods. And with less topsoil, they cause more damage. Droughts are more intense because there's less water stored in the soil. Floods are more destructive and they wash away what soil there is, and it doesn't hold the water. So all of this can cause devastation. And all of this impacts our ability to grow food in future generations. So I just want to highlight here that what you're talking about isn't just some nice to have. These kinds of principles, how we walk and live and grow our food in right relation with the earth, is fundamental to our survival.
Absolutely. No, that's what my elders tell me, is that things can change very severely and very quickly. And that's actually why I'm doing this PhD, because my elders told me that Native people control enough land to change the way the world thinks about food and water. And about 60% of the foods that the world enjoys are from indigenous peoples of the Americas, because our food sciences were so sophisticated. And as you may know, Native peoples are about 5% of the global population. Indigenous peoples, meaning people who have a long-standing, thousands of years belonging to a place, 5% of the world's population, and yet they're overseeing, according to a recent UN report, 80% of the world's biodiversity. So this idea that we were simpletons or primitive couldn't be farther from the truth, because we had an incredible knowledge of the biodiversity principles that actually cultivated and, like you said, regenerated the land around us.
When you say that indigenous peoples are stewards with 5% of the world's population of 80% of the world's biodiversity, what does that mean exactly? Is that the species, the animal and plant species of the world, are hyper concentrated in areas that indigenous peoples are helping to protect?
Yes, 5% of the world's this is according to a recent UN report, very wonderful report. If you just Google that, you'll find it. And they hold tenure over about 20% of the Earth's land. So we're talking about 20% of the Earth's land holding about 80% of the world's biodiversity. And yes, we're talking about species count. And of course, these are estimates based on sampling and extrapolating from those samples. But that's what it's looking like.
So that's actually good news for fans of biodiversity, because it means that a lot of the world's species are currently, to some extent, being protected by indigenous peoples who have a pretty good track record of caring for biodiversity. But of course, in many parts of the world, that those lands are threatened even today. It isn't just like encroachment on native peoples happened hundreds of years ago. It's continuing every day in many of those very hot spots that you're describing, with oil exploration, with deforestation, with cattle ranching, and so forth.
Yes, and it's, I think, a really important motivation for creating that report, which was done by led by an Indigenous woman, is to point out that, kind of to your point, Native peoples aren't just a cute thing to have around.
Yeah,
they actually are vital to the persistence of humanity, and to stop treating us as if we're disposable, because we're not. And so it's not just about protecting those lands, it's about protecting the people. And it's not just about protecting the people's bodies, it's about protecting our knowledge, because that is what is sustaining all of it.
It seems to me that one of the challenges that some indigenous peoples face is how to interact with a capitalist monetary system, and yet preserve their values, culture, and so forth. And for people that are truly able to be self-sufficient, it's one thing. But when they become dependent on external inputs, whether it's technology or internet or food systems, then it's much harder to maintain sovereignty within their own communities. And what is your take on how to navigate that? Like, what's your vision for how indigenous peoples, obviously every community is different and every context is different, but I guess what are some of the principles you hold for how indigenous peoples can preserve and sustain and deepen their culture, their values in communities around the world, care for their ecosystems that we all depend on for our survival, and at the same time find a way to live kind of in relationship to the modern world?
Well, that is the $1 million question, I think. But from what I've seen, a huge problem is solved by doing exactly what we're doing in this call, which is debunking the myth of who is civilized and who is not. I think we have to debunk this mythology that says that native cultures are inferior and US Western civilization is superior.
Right.
And when we do that, we'll make more room for indigenous worldviews, cosmologies, and practices.
One of the things that's occurring to me in this conversation too is that nobody exists in isolation, and we all share one climate, and if the industrialized societies of the world pollute the air and contaminate the waters, it's not going to be limited to just where they live. Everything spreads. We all breathe the same air, drink the same water, and share a common climate. And in that sense, the survival of indigenous peoples does depend in some way on the survival of humanity as a whole. And so in that sense, I think we come back kind of full circle to say, not just how can indigenous peoples survive in face of the onslaught of the violence, but also how can the industrialized world reconnect with our rightful place as humans on this planet. And it seems to me that most people I know living, with European descent folks in North America, carry a deep feeling of loneliness in their hearts, a feeling of uprootedness, a feeling of not quite belonging. And we address that in all kinds of different ways. But I think that loneliness kills more rapidly than cigarettes do. And it's one of the epidemics of the industrialized world. Do you think that there is indigenous wisdom that could help everybody, regardless of where their ancestors come from or where they live today, to feel more of a sense of belonging to the world?
If you go back far enough, we are all of an indigenous people or peoples, I'm half European by and large. my European side, my parent does have a little bit of native tribes mixed in there, but for the most part, I am a Scottish ancestry, Scandinavian, and maybe other things that I'm not clear on. And when I was in the Hogan, which is my mother's people, it's a traditional sacred building, and we sat in it, and we have to introduce all of our clans, right? All of our 4 grandparents. We have to say where they're from. So I was saying the European ones, right? And all of a sudden I could feel those ancestors coming in. And I was overtaken by their love and their kindness and their beauty. Because my whole life I was trained to think that white was bad, and they were the slave owners, and they were the ones who committed genocide, and it's not even worth, exploring. But in that ceremony, they came very strongly, and I knew that I was Indigenous all the way around, and that I had to honor those ancestors. And so I did go back to Europe. I did go to the British Isles. I did go to Switzerland. I did go to Italy and France. And I went to places and I prayed on the mountains, and I could feel that they missed us. They missed us Euro-Americans, and we come from a land. And I really saw that our task as white people is to shake the amnesia and to remember that we are from beautiful lands and goddess worshiping peoples. They found these clay effigies all over Europe. And one of them was found in German soil, and it's of a woman. And it's supposed to symbolize the fertility of the earth, the fertility of women, and honoring women. And they radiocarbon dated it. It was 40,000 years old. So this is how long our people have been using their hands to mold the clay into an effigy to honor the sanctity of the earth and of women. And that's who we are. That's who we are. Yeah. And the thin wall of time that dominates our understanding of Europe, King Louis, Napoleon, the Inquisition, that's not who we are. That was a very hard time where our people suffered greatly. The witch burnings and all of the knowledge and Indigenous knowledge that was lost with our grandmothers. But if you go before that, you will see rich Indigenous European culture. And so I guess that's my roundabout way of saying, absolutely, we do belong. We are of a beautiful people.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's who all of us are. There's something kind of fundamental here to how we perceive ourselves as human beings. And, I can sometimes look at humans as a bit of a scourge on the earth. I mean, we torture animals in factory farms, and everywhere we go, the people tend, many of us, to travel around and leave things worse than we found them. But you're telling us that that's not who we are, that we actually have the capacity to live in harmony with nature and to make things more beautiful for our being here. And that's good. That's good to know, to say the least. Indigenous farming practices have played a significant role in organic farming and integrated pest management in modern permaculture as practiced today. Can you give any examples of ways that Indigenous practices are actually being widely used right now?
Well, I mean, of course, you have polyculture, where you have, I mean, that was our general principle, right? The more diversity, the better. The more, the merrier. So if you just look at our corn, for example, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of varieties of corn. And even those varieties are ever evolving because we are continuously cross-pollinating. I brought some Pueblo corn to my friend earlier this spring, and he cross-pollinated it with his blue corn. So we had 2 different strands of blue corn to create a new blue corn. And so that is what we're always trying to do, is diversify genes at every opportunity. You also have, of course, the the biochar movement, coming up, which is funny because indigenous peoples always burned, pretty much from coast to coast. You see widespread low intensity burns that actually would enhance the soil. And you have the transformation of debris into potassium, nitrogen, and other bioavailable nutrients that the grasslands love, right? And so biochar, I heard that 1 tablespoon has a football field's worth of surface area, because the charcoal has all these miniature apartments for microbes inside of it. So when you burn, you're not just injecting bioavailable nutrients into the soil, you are also creating homes for microbes and to create a living soil. And so what are some other ways? In agriculture, I think a lot of us are thinking about water, right? And here's a really crazy idea. Don't pollute the surface water. That way you don't have to drill so deep into the earth to get water. It's just flowing right there to you. But I mean, Flint, Michigan, and all of the rivers, that have full of fertilizers and other toxic materials, they're all helping us learn what does not work. So I think that's the other side of the coin of sustainable agriculture is, like you said, starting to think about water. And the one last quick example I'll give is Tenochtitlan, which is now Mexico City, was a city on a lake, Lake Texcoco, before the Spanish arrived. This was a city, a floating city, and they actually created these floating gardens. And so if you imagine a city excreting poop and urine all day long, and they still didn't toxify that water source. So waste management got into the picture, and they had incredible ways of actually recycling their dung, their own human dung. And it was so valuable. Your own poop was so valuable. You could take it to the market in Tenochtitlan and trade it for things.
That's quite an image. We joke about selling SHIT, but it actually was happening. Well, that's fascinating. And just to add a couple of other pieces, you've used a couple of phrases. You talked about polyculture and you talked about food forests. And I just want to clarify that polyculture means multiple plants, right? So instead of a monocrop where you're just growing a giant field of one thing, you're having plants, companion planting and plants mixing it up and planting one thing in one season, another thing in another season. And that creates a diversity in the soil. Different plants give different things and take different things, and they balance each other out. And you actually create richer and richer soil when you do that in an intelligent way, like the Three Sisters, for example, right? Which are squash, beans, and corn. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those three.
Say that the fourth, which is amaranth.
Amaranth. Okay. Yeah. And they work in exquisite harmony. And then there's also, of course, planting nitrogen fixing plants, yes. Cover crops, as we call them sometimes. Yes. And that also enriches the soil. It actually adds nitrogen to the soil, which then makes the next plants that come after more abundant and vibrant. And these are all ways we restore the soil rather than just extracting from it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And a food forest, if I understand it correctly, that refers to when you have trees, fruit trees, or other nut trees, or other kind of food producing trees. And you've also got other plants at the base of them.
Yes.
And there's a harmony there as well, right?
Yes. I mean, the food forest, there's a lot of cool paleo-ecological work being done, which basically means looking into the past. What did the forest look like 10,000 years ago, 20, 30,000 years ago? And every single study that I've been perusing talks about how there was a hyper dominance of edible plant species in the deep time, and especially around certain indigenous settlements. And so it's pretty simple, really. You just plant the plants that give you food.
I want to kind of take us to a broader level here. I've heard you describe the problems humanity is facing in the industrialized world as being in part a spiritual crisis. What do you mean by that? How do you see that?
Well, you know, we don't understand how the world works. We don't understand that I'm not just talking to ocean right now. I'm talking to ocean and all of the spirits that hang out with ocean, um, whether they are found or whether they are lost. And so we are not only biochemical beings who are never static, right? Even when you're sitting, you're not just sitting. There's so much going on inside of you. But not only are we biochemical, but we are interacting with a spiritual world. And sadly, the Enlightenment era has sort of dumbed our senses to be able to understand that we're a part of a living, breathing spiritual world as well. And so when we're restoring food systems, we're also restoring communities, and we're restoring spirits, we're restoring cultures. So I'll just end by saying this. What I was taught by my elders is that to hold the ancestors in you and to be the hands and the feet of Creator, we need two main conditions, nothing for the self and no fear. And so that nothing for the self piece, it means, you're not doing it for fame and reputation, and you're not doing it for money, right? And in our culture, we are really training our children to do what they do for fame and money. And the fear, of course, is very much cultivated in our culture. So it's not just about cultivating food forests and gardens and organic farming. It's about cultivating an inner environment that can hold space for the ancestors, for the angels, or whatever your culture calls it, to actually become the hands and feet of something greater than us. And so those two conditions, nothing for the self and no fear, have really, once I learned that, a lot of things in my life had to change, and I'm still fine tuning it. But imagine if we taught young people that in school, it would change everything. But instead we have a homecoming queen and a homecoming king, and you want to be the most popular, you want your reputation out there, and you're going to school to get a job to get money. So we almost train the medicine person out of every child. And I think that's what we're trying to cultivate, in addition to these food systems, is an inner environment that can hold that love and that compassion that makes humans, cultures healthy.
Thank you. I would also add that gardening, just touching soil, interacting with plants, can be very healing and restorative. In my experience, there's something satisfying about it that goes beyond the fact that I get food, or that I have food security. Those are wonderful things. But there's also something about being connected to a sense of place. And there's nothing quite like actually getting your hands in the dirt and actually feeling the source of life growing in your own backyard or in your own kitchen. If you just have like little sprouts on the counter, to feel like, wow, I'm part of life happening. And it's very humbling in a way, because we feel our sense of dependency on the natural world, which really does give all of us life.
Yes.
Lyla, I know that among other things, you are an artist with words and song, and I wonder if you would share something with us today as we complete our time together.
Yeah, sure. I was going to read a poem, but now as we were talking, I was remembering I wrote a song about water. So this is going to be released soon with the music video and all of that. But this is actually mostly the words of a Mescalero Apache elder by the name of Oliver Njadi. So as I sing this song, keep them in your thoughts. And I just told him, what about water? What does our old people tell us about water? And this is what he said. So, and I said, how do I put that into a song? And so he gave me a long list of notes that I tried to turn into a song. So here we go. He said, it's not a song, it's a way of life. It's a forever thing, it's a message. He said, you can say that water is life. You can sing it again and again, but will they listen? Are we gonna stand by these words? Are we gonna find a way to change the way we're living, Mother Earth? She feels everything and it hurts. Like the moon, like the body of a woman, she is changing. Can we return to the times when water was alive, when we prayed at her edge and gave thanks for this life, when the water fell from the sky and we drank from her bosom, when the water fell from our eyes and the water fell from our wombs, when it rose up to the surface and we knew every spring. No fear or competition, just a relative to all things. We are people of the sun, we are people of the water. We will celebrate our sons, we will celebrate our daughters, give them ceremony, so when the drought comes, they'll be ready. Will the next war be for water? All our solutions are part of the problem, can win war with war. There is more than one creation story. Worlds have died and worlds have been reborn before. When you touch the water, you touch the world. From Taos peaks to Gulf streams, the memories they hold. We sell her by the acre foot and treat her as our captive. The rivers are undrinkable while the aquifers extracted. Our food will need water to grow, but do you have to take it all? We try to hold her and control her as we watch our empire fall. He said, it's not a song, it's a way of life. It's a forever thing, it's a message. He said, you can say that water is life. You can sing it again and again, but can you live it?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me share.
As you were sharing, it really moved me when you sang about the water that flows in our tears and flows from wombs. And I just felt this reality that we're mostly water. And suddenly this illusion that humans are separate from the earth just kind of dissolved for me. And I felt this reality that we are the earth. We are part of the earth, and the earth invites us to come home to that knowing. So we can reclaim our truth, which is we are expressions of life on this planet, longing, I think, to heal and get to be part of that healing.
I'm glad it could have that effect.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking here with Lyla June, Indigenous activist, scientist, ecologist, advocate, singer, and songwriter. You can find out more about her at lylajune.com. That's LYLAJUNE.com. She said, it's not about the ego, it's not about fear, it's certainly not. And we also want to build connections. And so if people want to contact her, please do so. Lyla, it's been a real privilege to share this time with you, and I look forward to more in the future.
Yes, thank you, Ocean. Appreciate it.